The Lab Analysis Capabilities webinar series was split into 2 parts. So last month in June, we covered part 1, and this covered some of the new features such as DQOs, mixtures, sample location lifecycle, the analysis request form lifecycle, and nonconformance. And today is part 2, and we will be covering the lab portal, electronic data deliverable, uploads, the message board, assessment, and some mapping features.
Today we're going to pick up where we left off on part 1. We showed you the new sample workflow, how to make mixtures and establish your analysis instructions and develop your analysis request forms. So today we're going to pick up where we left off in part 1. We're going to take the perspective of the responding laboratory that receives the RF and the samples, performs the analysis, and posts their data to RadResponder in the new lab portal. So the process is sort of described here in this flow chart, where the sample control will ship the analysis request out to the lab. The lab gets notified. They download the analysis request form and review the information, prepare their lab for the receipt of those samples. When the samples arrive in RadResponder through the portal, they're able to mark the samples as received, and that information gets pushed back to the FIRMAC or sample control. Then once the lab performs their analysis and creates their result files and their electronic data deliverable files in the RadResponder data reporting format, they'll post those files to their portal. Then we have the option of having a QA specialist or someone tasked with reviewing this lab data go in, download those files, take a look at them, make sure the EDD is filled out correctly and ready to upload. If there's any issues that pop up during the analysis or during the QA review, there's a new message board feature that can be used to document that communication between the lab and the FIRMAC or the sample control. And once everything's all good, the QA specialist can fill out a new form called the data verification form on the analysis request to document their review and indicate any issues they may have found. Once that's done, the data is uploaded to the system and available for use by your dose assessment scientist or whoever needs to be looking at that radiological sample data. On the back end of the process, we've improved the ability to get the results out of the system through an expanded format, a data format that gives you all the metadata that you would ever need in a nice flat Excel table that you can pare down and chop down as needed. And you can access this through the analytical results section of RadResponder or even through the map, where you can specify filters and draw a specific region as a filter and export your data in one big giant file with all the different data types on separate tabs. So we're going to demonstrate all that stuff today. So it all starts with this lab access portal. This is a new part of RadResponder that we developed to allow the labs a place to go and post or retrieve their analysis request information and post their data. So it's a special access portal into RadResponder where the labs are given their own organization where they can manage their own staff. So they can add more people to help do the data reporting, and they will all have their individual username and password so it can track who's in the system when. It only gives the labs access to the analysis request forms that have been sent to them and keeps all the other information secure on the full RadResponder side. So you no longer need to give your laboratories full RadResponder access where they would be able to see all sorts of things about the event. This keeps your information more secure and also hides the locations of the samples from the people that don't need to know that information. So we've simplified the interface so that it requires minimal training for these lab users. It's not going to be their day job going in here to post data. It's going to pretty much only be used during exercises or real world events. So we try to make it very simple and easy to use and cut out all the things that they don't need access to do their job. So the lab can go in, pull up their analysis request, download the result template, fill it in and post that file, and also manage some communications between the people sending them the samples using this new messaging feature that we'll show you. So we get a lot of questions when we do drills and exercises and round robins with laboratories that a lot of people ask what information should labs provide in a data package. other than just the results themselves. The FIRMAC working group is currently working on coming up with a more formal list and descriptions and examples of this, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time today just sort of pointing out a few of the highlight things that we look for in a data package to help us do our review and ensure the data quality. The first thing we like to see in a data package for an analysis request is called a case narrative, and this is typically a short document that describes what the lab did with the samples, how they were received. It notes any issues or questions or concerns they have as they work through the samples. It'll also summarize the internal laboratory quality control that might have been run with the batch, such as a method blank, lab control samples, instrument checks, and so on. And also, if the lab uses any special flags or notation on their reporting or data, it'll explain what those are. In addition to the case narrative, we also ask for the signed analytical report. So this is typically something that is generated by a laboratory's information system, their LIMS, or through the vendor instrument software, such as a gamma spectroscopy report. And it's going to tell us things about the analysis, what sort of algorithm settings were chosen for the analysis, the peak analysis, what sort of radiochemistry might have been done. So it'll include some radiochemistry checklists, perhaps, with different like weights and sizes of subsamples and whatnot. All that's going to be signed by the analyst and possibly signed by a QA reviewer at the laboratory side. And that helps us compare the electronic results to what the lab report says to make sure there were no transcription errors or anything. And it also gives us a good idea of what was done with the samples and what assumptions were made and whatnot, so that we can properly fill out our data verification form and flag our data in RadResponder, flag the quality of that data. The last, probably the most important thing is the electronic data deliverable file. So that's the Excel file filled out with all the analytical results that we're going to import into RadResponder that will eventually make it to the database and be used by our dose assessment scientists. So we're going to go in now and we're going to show you guys how the lab portal looks and how it functions. Remember, in part one, we created our analysis request form and we sent it to our test lab called CBT Demo Lab. As Christine goes in here and shows you guys, you're going to see the RadResponder site looks a little different, a little cleaner, as fewer things to click on. That's because we're logging in as if we were a lab account and we only had a lab access organizational account in RadResponder.
Great, thank you, Sean. So yeah, as you can see right here, this is the lab portal homepage. Once you log in, it's simplified, also like Sean mentioned. So we're going to start by going into the lab portal, and I'll let Sean narrate as I drive through the site.
Okay, so the lab portal button there gives you access to all the analysis requests that are sent to your lab, regardless of what incident they come from. So she's gonna scroll down. You'll see there's a bunch of analysis requests for this lab. This is one we use for testing a lot. So we're going to drill into the analysis request form that we created last time. And you'll see at the top here, there's a few buttons. The first button is downloads the analysis request form PDF. So all this information is on the page here, but it's conveniently placed in this PDF and is identical to the one that would likely be printed out and be arriving with the samples with the signatures for chain of custody. So they're able to look at this ARF and see what's coming, check the analysis requirements, and prepare their lab to receive those samples. Another button you have here is the result template. So they're able to download the result template and use that to fill their analytical results in. It's just the Excel file that you get out of RadResponder. So it's empty. So this is where the lab would fill in their information. And then finally, there's that received by lab button. So this is the button that triggers the status of the analysis request form to received by lab, indicating that the samples arrived and they were the custody was transferred to the laboratory. So when it yes, you'll see the ARF status is changing. Received by laboratory. So that information, of course, back in the full RadResponder site would indicate that this ARF was received by the lab and they're currently working on it. So you can see here they can track their package with the shipment number. They could look at the samples attached. This new section called messages is a way for them to document a comment or a question back to the sample control. Now, we wouldn't use this 100% of the time. Likely we'd be making phone calls for quick things, but if there's some sort of issue or something that we need a paper trail on so that others in the future could look back and see, this is a good way to document that information exchange. So you want to go ahead and click add message. And so we're just going to put in a comment here, leaking sample issue resolved. We're going to save that. And then a little bit later today, we're going to show everyone where this landed and how the full RadResponder user will see this and resolve that comment or respond to that message. So let's assume that the laboratory has done their analysis and uploaded that they have all their case narrative and their analysis reports and data ready to upload. So this is where they're going to attach those files under documents. So there we go, you got our case narrative. The electronic data deliverable. All right, once those files are uploaded, they're available to the full RadResponder user to download and review. Once that data is put into the system by the laboratory, that kicks off the next stage in the workflow is the data review process. So we have a new way to document our data review on the data verification form. This is a new form that's attached to the analysis request form that users can use sort of like a quality assurance checklist. And also it's a good place to document any issues you might find with the data. So we have a position in the format called QA specialist. They're going to be going into each analysis request form, downloading the files, reviewing them, and filling out this form. The final stage is to get that EDD file and import it into RadResponder and mark that data as approved, rejected, or suspect. All right, so I want to show you guys one new spot that in the left menu that we've developed. Now keep in mind we're a full RadResponder user now, so our job now is to review the data. We're responsible for reviewing the data and importing it. So we're going to go down to lab analysis. You'll see a new section called message board. This shows all the messages for all the ARFs for the event. So it's a good dashboard to go in and look for messages. All right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to drill into our ARF. Now go down to the second one there. And we're the QA reviewer. So we're going to look at this ARF. We're going to become familiar with what the request was. We're going to go down to the bottom and scroll down to the messages. We're going to see that we have a message here from the lab. And we can respond to this message by hitting the add message button. All right, so we're going to hit save. And that's going to get sent back to the lab, and then this information is documented in the site. Next, we're going to go into documents and download the lab data package files. There's a nice easy way to get all of them at once. You hit download all. It's going to drop a zip file with all the files. All right, and this is where we get into the technical review of the data. You're going to want to have somebody that's familiar with reviewing radiological sample data do this job. It's it's very expertise-based, experience-based. And so in the FIRMAC, we have quality assurance specialists that have worked in this role in their day jobs. So they're going to go through, they're going to look at the reports, they're going to see if anything's fishy or out of order. They're going to make sure that the lab met the requirements that were set for them in the analysis request form. And when they're all done with their review, they're going to go up to the top here and open up the data verification form. And they're going to use this as sort of a checklist to show all the things that they looked at. Anything out of order, they can place a comment in here. When the form's completed, it can be printed out and stored as a paper copy or PDF. or it could just stay in the system here attached to that analysis request form. So you'll see here, printing will generate the PDF for that form, or edit, you can make changes at any time. It's going to record who made the changes and all that. So we're going to go back to the analysis request form. And once we're done, we're going to mark the results as reviewed right there. And that's going to transition the status of that analysis request form to results reviewed. That means that everything's good. We've looked at the results and we have, this doesn't necessarily mean that the ARF is 100% done, because the lab may provide a data package for part of the requested analysis, the one that maybe takes a day or two to complete, and then the longer term analysis that may take a week or two may come later. So we're going to leave this as the status of results reviewed until all that data comes back. When all that data comes back and we've reviewed everything, we're going to go ahead and hit that mark completed button at the top, and that's going to transition it to its final status of completed. And that is the end of the analysis request lifecycle, meaning everything on that analysis request has been completed and is ready to go. So we're going to take those EDD files that we downloaded from the ARF, and we're going to go in and import them into the system. Go under Data, Analytical Results, and there's a button at the top, Import Results. And here's where we actually import the data into the database. So we reviewed it, everything looks good. We're ready to make this data available to our data users. We're going to put that file in, upload it. We're going to go through, it's going to do validation checks. It may come up with some issues. Those can either be resolved by the QA staff, or they can, through the message board, go back to the lab, ask for amendments to the electronic data. The lab can remove the old file, replace it with a new corrected file if that's needed. That import looked great. It completed. There were no validation errors. Next, we're going to go check out our results in our analysis table. And there you can see all the results that the lab provided have now been imported to the RadResponder database. Users can now assess the data. We can mark it as reviewed. Typically, we're going to want to go in here and filter things down by analysis request form. And we're going to assess the entire filtered set to be as accepted, rejected, suspect, or unassessed. So an example of marking something as rejected or suspect is if something was done that wasn't quite right with the analysis, but it wasn't bad enough to request a recount, or it was for a method that couldn't be redone, and we're kind of taking what we can get. You can mark results as suspect so that the data users know something's fishy about that result. I need to look a little further. They can look at the lab's reports. They can look at the data verification form. There's a lot of places where they can kind of investigate what the issue was. You can also go in here and, as a data reviewer, put in a comment on each result if there's any specific result to have an issue. If you have a whole batch of results and only one or two are needed to be rejected or marked suspect, you can go down to the individual result and change that flag to whatever you want here and add comments to that individual result. And again, when you export that data, all that data review, comment, and status information gets exported with the results. So the users will have that at their fingertips in the export file. So you can see here, the data user or the dose assessment scientist can go in. They can go into analytical results and apply any of the filters, and they can export the data using this new template we've created, the export to Excel all columns. This way they get all the metadata for every single different sample type and the analysis results all glued together in a giant table. Once you get the data, you can go in and chop out any columns you don't need or do any other extra filtering in Excel. If you wanted to use RadResponder to filter things down and pare things down to only the columns that you want, you can use the export to CSV option here. And that's just going to show the visible columns that you have on your screen at the current moment. So that's how you get data out of the analytical results table. A new feature that we've developed is a way to get the data out of the map and include all of the survey data, sample data, and result data all in one shot from the map tool itself. So Christine's going to go into RadResponder, pull up the map, and draw a polygon around some data, this data, and show you how that export works. So we got south of I-40, west of I-25. We're going to draw a polygon here. You can also specify other filters like time or what type of data you want to see. You can do all that before you draw this polygon, and it's going to allow you to name that region. And typically this, in our operation, this kind of filter set would define trying to answer a specific question. So we would apply our filters to pull our data out to answer the specific question we're looking for answers to, and then we're going to draw the polygon, save it, and export the data by clicking on that region. You can export it as a separate KML or shapefile for your GIS system, or an Excel file if you need to do calculations. Every data type is separated by a tab in the Excel workbook. So you'll see we have a tab for samples, a tab for results. And what I really like about these export templates that they've developed at RadResponder is the first tab always tells you what filters were applied to the data before you dig into it. So you'll know if you're capturing everything you need. And you'll notice that this includes all data types, but we only have the 2 different columns here because that was all that was captured by the filter set. So you won't see tabs for the data elements or data types that you didn't get because they weren't included in the map itself. Throughout the last 2 webinars, we've talked about workflow and statuses and whatnot. All of these things are tied together nicely in RadResponder now. We've engineered a whole bunch of auto triggers to minimize the amount of work that you have to do to track things. And this flow chart here kind of shows the complexity of it. While it looks complicated and a little bit daunting, it's been engineered to be very automated. So you don't see a lot of this stuff behind the scenes. And what this helps you with is when you have a large event with thousands or even hundreds of thousands of samples, you're going to be confident that when you pull metrics out based on sample status that they're accurate and you have a good picture of where things are in the process. That's very important to be able to communicate that to Unify Command. When people are chomping at the bit for lab results, they're going to want to know where things are in the process. And now with all these new workflow tools and statuses and things connected, and having one site where everyone uses, including the laboratories, it's going to be a lot more robust. Another nice thing about this, the way we've designed this, is that it's fairly flexible. If you don't want to do a certain step, you don't necessarily need to, as long as you're okay with not having the detailed metrics that others might need. You can kind of use it and fit it to the way you want to do business, but it will still pretty much align with what the FIRMAC is doing. As part of the project, we've developed training content and job aids for these using these new features. A whole bunch of 1 to 2 page job aids on every major step in the sample control and laboratory analysis process. We've recorded a couple training videos on the major tasks in RadResponder that can be used to train a new person very quickly on a specific task. And another thing we're working on right now, it's going to take a little time, is we're updating the FIRMAC laboratory analysis manual to reflect this new process that we've developed in RadResponder. So all this stuff will be posted to RadResponder in the coming months. As FIRMAC transitions to this tool over the next year, 2 years, we're kind of the first in all of the groups to make the leap into RadResponder and get our process built in. So we're currently working on the other parts of the FIRMAC, but as we come across to RadResponder, we'll be posting that kind of stuff to the site for everyone to use.